Have you ever watched someone walk through a storm, not with anger, not with fear, but with a calm that almost felt unreal? They didn't raise their voice, they didn't seek attention. But something about the way they kept moving forward made you stop and admire them, even if you couldn't quite explain why. That's real strength, not the kind that flexes in the gym or shouts in a boardroom. Not the kind that demands respect with noise and titles, but the kind that stands quietly in the background and yet holds everything together when the world begins to unravel. This kind of strength isn't always visible, but it's always felt. You see it in the single mother who keeps showing up for her kids even when she's exhausted, in the man who walks away from the argument instead of escalating it, in the friend who keeps their promises when no one's watching, in the quiet decision to choose healing over revenge, discipline over impulse, stillness over chaos. You don't have to be loud to be powerful. You don't have to explain yourself to prove your worth. And you certainly don't need a crowd to validate your courage. In today's world, where everyone seems to be shouting just to be heard, we often forget that the strongest people are the ones who know how to be silent and still be seen. This video is for you. If you've ever wondered whether your quiet resilience means anything, if you've ever felt unseen while doing the hard, invisible work of growing stronger, if you've ever chosen peace over drama, depth over attention, or walked away from what no longer serves you, then this message is meant for you. Today I'll walk you through 9 quiet but powerful signs that reveal you're far stronger than you give yourself credit for. These are not flashy, they're not loud, but they are real and undeniable. You might not think of yourself as strong, but by the end of this video, you just might realize your strength has been there all along. Let's begin. Sign number 1. You don't run from responsibility. You face it, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it's easier to blame someone else. That's rare, and it's powerful. In a world where passing the buck has become the norm, you do something different. When something goes wrong, you don't waste time pointing fingers or justifying your decisions. You step up. You say, that one's on me, not out of guilt, but out of strength. Let me give you an example. Imagine you're leading a project at work, and a critical decision you made, perhaps trusting the wrong vendor or underestimating a delivery deadline, results in a major setback. A key client is upset. Your team is stressed. There's pressure from above. You could easily say, well, the client didn't give us enough time, or the team didn't communicate properly. But instead, you choose a different path. You go to the client directly. You apologize. You explain the situation honestly. And then you do the most courageous thing of all. You offer a solution. You don't hide behind excuses. You turn a failure into a moment of leadership. That's what real strength looks like. Not perfection, but responsibility. Not the need to be right, but the willingness to be real. Taking responsibility doesn't mean you're weak. It doesn't mean you enjoy being wrong. It means you understand something deeper. That growth only happens when you're honest with yourself. Stoic philosopher Epictetus once said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." And this is exactly that. When you respond with ownership, you reclaim your power. You stop being a passive character in your story and become the author of what happens next. And here's an unexpected gift. People trust you more. They may not say it out loud, but they notice, they respect your integrity. They remember that when things got hard, you didn't run. You showed up. We live in a culture that often rewards the appearance of strength, confidence, success, image. But true strength, the kind that builds character and trust, begins with this quiet choice to take responsibility for your actions, even when it's uncomfortable. If you're someone who chooses to own your part, learn from it, and make things right, you're not just strong, you're rare, and you're setting a standard the world desperately needs more of. Sign number 2, you persevere, even when no one is watching. There's a quiet kind of strength that most people never notice. It doesn't look like success from the outside. There are no trophies, no applause, no one cheering you on. But it's there in the stillness, in the struggle, in the small, consistent steps you take when everyone else has already given up. Maybe you know this feeling. Maybe you've spent the past 3 months learning a new skill after long hours at a job you no longer love. Not because anyone asked you to, not because anyone believed in you, but because something deep inside whispered, keep going. Every night, after dinner, after the dishes, after the exhaustion, you sat down and studied. You practiced. You failed quietly and tried again. Most people around you had no idea what you were building, but you did. That's perseverance, and that's real strength. It's easy to be motivated when things are exciting. But what about when it's lonely? What about when you're tired, unsure, and progress feels painfully slow? That's where most people stop. But not you. You see, the strongest people aren't the loudest. They're the most consistent. They don't need to prove anything. They're not chasing quick wins. They're laying bricks one at a time, knowing that what they're building will one day become something unshakable. Stoic philosophy teaches us that greatness doesn't come from ease. It comes from endurance, from doing the right thing over and over, even when no one is watching, especially then. There's something deeply noble about showing up without recognition, about putting in the effort when no one's keeping score, because you're not doing it for praise. You're doing it for who you're becoming in the process. And yes, it's exhausting at times. You might wonder if it's worth it. You might feel invisible. But hear this, what you're building in silence will one day speak volumes. And when that moment comes, when you land the job, finish the degree, or simply become someone you're proud of, it won't be because of luck. It'll be because you showed up when it was hard, when it was thankless, when it was lonely. So if you're quietly pushing forward step by step, know this, your perseverance is not wasted. It's building strength, character, and a life that no one can take from you. Sign number 3, you know how to say no to protect your peace. That single word, no, might be one of the hardest things for a strong person to say. Not because they're afraid of conflict, but because they care deeply. They want to show up for people. They want to be dependable. But somewhere along the way, they've learned that saying yes to everything often means saying no to themselves. You've probably been in this situation before. It's the holiday season. Your family expects you to make the trip home. Even though you're running on empty, you're not being selfish. You're just exhausted. Work has drained you. Life has been nonstop. And what you really need is one quiet weekend to breathe, rest, and reconnect with yourself. So you make the hard decision. You say, not this time. You hear the disappointment in their voices, maybe even a few guilt-tripping comments. You've changed. It's just one weekend, or family should come first. But deep down, you know something they don't. Burnout isn't love. And running yourself into the ground doesn't help anyone in the long run. So you stay home, you rest, you take long walks, sleep in, make a real meal, and slowly feel your body and mind reset. And when the time comes to be present for others again, You're not just there, you're whole. That's what people don't understand about boundaries. They're not about pushing people away. They're about preserving your ability to love, give, and connect from a place of abundance, not depletion. Stoic wisdom teaches us that self-mastery begins with self-awareness. And setting boundaries is a form of deep self-awareness. It says, I know my limits, I honor my needs, I protect my peace so I can show up with intention. Strong people don't say no because they don't care. They say no because they do care about their time, their energy, and their long-term well-being. Saying no isn't rejection, it's redirection. It's choosing what aligns with your values, your needs, and your truth. Even when it's uncomfortable, even when people don't understand. So if you've ever declined an invitation, set a boundary, or stepped back from something because it cost you too much internally, don't feel guilty. Feel grounded. Because in that moment, you weren't just protecting your time, you were protecting your future. And that, in its quiet, confident way, is one of the strongest things a person can do. Sign number 4, you stay true to yourself, even when it makes you stand alone. In a world that often rewards conformity, there's something incredibly rare about a person who's willing to speak the truth when everyone else remains silent. It takes courage to stand your ground, not out of stubbornness, but out of integrity. Imagine sitting in a conference room, the air thick with agreement. A new cost-cutting plan is on the table, and most of your colleagues are nodding along. On paper, the plan makes sense, cutting staff to improve the bottom line. But something in your gut twists. These aren't just numbers. They're people, families, lives. You feel the tension rise in your chest. You know speaking up could make you the outlier, maybe even cost you something, but you do it anyway, calmly, clearly, respectfully. You say, I don't agree with this. Not because you want to make waves, but because you can't look the other way when something feels wrong. That's strength. Not just the strength to speak, but the strength to be seen as different. Many people confuse agreement with unity. They think blending in is the same as belonging. But those are not the same. Real belonging requires honesty, and true leadership doesn't follow the crowd. It follows principle. Stoic philosophy teaches us that no one can control our inner values unless we hand that control away. You didn't hand yours away. You chose discomfort over dishonesty. You chose authenticity over approval. And in doing so, you revealed a depth of character that can't be faked. Of course, it's not easy. Being the only one to raise your voice in a room full of silence can feel isolating. People might look at you differently. They might question your motives. But what matters most isn't how they see you, it's how you see yourself when you walk out of that room. Strong people know that integrity often comes with a pun, but they pay it willingly because the alternative, betraying your own values just to fit in, costs far more in the long run. So if you've ever been the lone voice of reason, the only one to challenge a plan, question a motive, or raise an ethical concern, take heart. You are not difficult. You are not dramatic. You are principled. And the world needs more people like you, not because you're loud, but because you're grounded. Because you choose to stand even when it's easier to sit in silence. That's not just strength. That's moral clarity. And it never goes unnoticed. Sign number 5. You help others even when there's nothing in it for you. Not for praise, not for recognition, not to be seen as good. You help because you understand something deeper, that people struggle quietly, and sometimes the smallest act of support can lift someone from the edge. Maybe you've been there before, caught in a tight schedule, swamped with deadlines, and still you notice someone new on your team. They're clearly overwhelmed, unsure, hesitant to ask for help. You could look the other way. No one would blame you, but you don't. You carve out time. You walk them through the system. You answer their questions without judgment. You remind them that learning takes time and that making mistakes is part of the process. And over the next few weeks, you watch them slowly gain confidence. Not because they suddenly became brilliant, but because someone believed in them before they believed in themselves. That's leadership. That's quiet strength. And here's the thing, no one saw that moment. You didn't post about it. You didn't expect a thank you card. You just did it because you know what it feels like to be lost. You remember the anxieties of starting something new, of wondering if you belong. People often associate strength with control or status, but in truth, one of the purest forms of strength is the ability to lift someone else, especially when it costs you time, energy, or comfort. Stoic wisdom reminds us we rise by lifting others, not through dominance, but through compassion grounded in clarity. That doesn't mean you sacrifice yourself for everyone. Strong people also understand the importance of boundaries. But when you choose to help on your own terms, you do it with intention, not obligation. And here's what's truly powerful. Even if they never repay you, even if they forget your name, you've still changed their story. You became a bridge in a moment of uncertainty, a quiet presence that made the difference between giving up and moving forward. So if you're someone who extends a hand without keeping score, you're demonstrating a strength this world desperately needs more of. Because real strength isn't just about what you can carry. It's about who you're willing to carry with you, if only for a while, until they can walk on their own. And if you've ever done that, thank you. You may not see the ripple effect now, but trust me, it's there. Sign number 6. You allow yourself to feel without letting pain define you. Some people think strength means never breaking down, never crying, never showing emotion. But that's not strength. That's armor. And armor might protect you from being seen, but it also keeps you from healing. True strength, it looks different. It's quieter, more honest. It's what happens when everything falls apart and you let yourself feel it. Maybe it was a breakup, a relationship that once felt like your future suddenly becoming your past. The kind that leaves you stunned, not because you didn't see it coming, but because you had invested so much of yourself in it. There's a certain kind of silence that follows a heartbreak, isn't there? The kind that makes even your own breathing feel loud. You didn't pretend to be okay. You didn't rush to post, "I'm thriving," updates, or fake a smile for everyone else's comfort. Instead, you allowed yourself the space to grieve. You cried. You confided in a close friend. You sat with the pain, not to wallow in it, but to understand it. That choice? That's what made you stronger, because strength isn't about how fast you get over something. It's about how real you're willing to be while you're in it. When you allow yourself to feel sadness, loss, disappointment, you're not giving in. You're giving space to breathe, to process, to recover. Stoic philosophy reminds us that while we don't control what happens to us, we always control what we do next. And in choosing to feel instead of suppress, to acknowledge instead of numb, you're reclaiming that control. Here's what's even more powerful. You didn't stay in the dark. After the tears, you started getting up again. Slowly, gently. You learned to enjoy your own company. You rediscovered little joys that didn't rely on anyone else. You realize that pain doesn't erase your worth, it reveals your resilience. That's the beauty of vulnerability. It connects us, grounds us, and teaches us how to begin again. It reminds us that we are not made of stone. We are made of spirit. And while spirit can break, it can also rebuild, wiser, softer, stronger. So if you've ever allowed yourself to be fully human, if you've ever sat in sadness without letting it consume you, if you've ever dared to hope again after being hurt, know this, you're not weak, you're awake. And that kind of self-awareness, that depth of heart, that capacity to hurt and to heal, that is one of the truest signs of inner strength. Sign number 7. You face your fears instead of running from them. Here's something most people get wrong about strength. They think it means never being afraid. But the truth is, courage has nothing to do with the absence of fear. It's about how you move through fear. It's about showing up, even when your voice shakes and your hands won't stay still. Maybe for you, it was a public speaking opportunity, a big conference, a packed room. And years ago, you had a moment, maybe in school or at work, where your voice cracked, someone laughed, and you never forgot the sting of that moment. Most people would have said no when the next chance came around, and you thought about it too. But something inside you said, not this time. So you signed up anyway. You felt the anxiety bubble up. You rehearsed, doubted yourself, rehearsed again, and on the day of the event, your heart was racing as you stepped up to that podium. It wasn't perfect. Maybe you stumbled over a word or two. Maybe your hands trembled. But you did it. You finished. And afterward, you didn't just survive. You grew. That's how fear works. It shrinks us only when we let it. But when we confront it, even if we're terrified, it loses a little of its grip. And the power of that one step forward, it doesn't just push a boundary. It redraws your entire map of what's possible. Fear is tricky. It doesn't always look like panic. Sometimes it shows up as procrastination or excuses that sound reasonable. Now's not the right time. I'm just not ready. What if I fail again? But deep down, we know when fear is behind the wheel. And if you've ever taken the wheel back, even once, that's strength in motion. Stoic philosophy tells us that fear is not the enemy, it's a guide. It shows us where our edge is. And if you want to grow, you don't avoid the edge. You lean into it, carefully, intentionally, with awareness. Every time you face something that scares you, you gain more than courage. You gain confidence. Not the loud, flashy kind, but the quiet kind that stays with you. The kind that says, if I was through that, I can get through this too. So if you've ever stood in the fire of your own fear and refused to back down, even when it burned, take a moment to recognize that strength. Because fear doesn't disappear, but neither do you. And when the two meet again and again, you emerge not fearless, but unshakable. Sign number 8, you choose silence, not because you're weak, but because you've learned that not every battle is worth your energy. There's a quiet kind of power and restraint in knowing you could respond. You could clap back. You could throw your words like weapons, but you don't. You pause. You protect your peace instead. In today's world, silence is often misunderstood. People think if you're quiet, you're passive. That if you don't speak up right away, you're backing down. But the truth is, sometimes silence is the strongest response of all, because it shows that you've mastered yourself. Think about a moment when someone attacked you online. Maybe they left a cruel comment, twisted your words, or questioned your character publicly. The impulse is natural. You want to defend yourself. You want to explain. You want the last word, but instead you stopped. You took a breath. You realized that reacting in that moment wouldn't serve you. It would only drain you. So you reported the comment, you logged off, and you moved on with your life. That decision, that's strength. Not because it was loud, not because it proved a point, but because it protected something far more important, your peace of mind. There's a line from Marcus Aurelius that comes to mind. You always own the option of having no opinion. It's not indifference. It's discipline. It's the ability to detach from noise, to rise above pettiness, and to choose your response with intention, not emotion. We live in a culture that rewards fast reactions, but strong people aren't driven by impulse. They're anchored. They know that not every insult requires a reply, not every provocation deserves attention, and not every disagreement needs to be won. You don't avoid conflict because you're afraid. You avoid it because you're wise, because you've fought enough battles to know which ones actually matter and which ones just want to steal your focus. Choosing silence doesn't mean suppressing your voice. It means knowing when your voice is most powerful. It means speaking when it builds, not when it burns. So if you've ever walked away from an argument, closed your laptop instead of typing a heated reply, or simply let someone's bad energy pass through you without reacting, you've demonstrated a strength most people never develop. Because the world tells you to speak up, fight back, make noise, but you've discovered something deeper, the calm within. And that calm isn't weakness, it's mastery. Sign number 9, you're comfortable being alone without feeling empty. There's a kind of strength that doesn't show up in loud rooms or crowded calendars. It shows up in quiet moments, in stillness, in solitude. And not the kind of solitude that feels like isolation, but the kind you choose because you've come to appreciate the person you are when the world goes quiet. In a culture that glorifies constant connection, where social validation is only a swipe away, it takes real courage to say, this weekend I'm staying in, not because I'm excluded, but because I need this space. You pour yourself a cup of tea. You sit with a book that's been waiting for your attention. You journal, not to post, but to process. The house is quiet, the phone is on silent, and yet you feel whole. That's not loneliness, that's presence, that's self-respect. Most people avoid being alone because it forces them to confront what they've been trying to escape. Their thoughts, their regrets, their unmet expectations. But not you. You've learned that solitude isn't a punishment, it's a mirror. And when you sit with yourself long enough, the noise fades, the truth rises, and the parts of you that were once scattered begin to return. It doesn't mean you don't value others. You love connection, you appreciate community, but you've also realized something essential. You don't need to be surrounded to feel seen. You don't need constant interaction to feel alive, because you've built a relationship with the one person you'll spend your entire life with, yourself. Stoic philosophy teaches us that the person who finds peace in solitude holds a kind of freedom no one can take away. They're not ruled by external noise. They're anchored in internal clarity. The irony is, once you stop fearing time alone, you stop settling for shallow company. You become more discerning with your time, your energy, your relationships. You choose depth over distraction, silence over chaos, meaning over noise. So if you've ever turned down the party, closed the app, or stayed home just to be with your own thoughts and found comfort in that choice, You're not strange. You're strong because strength isn't always forged in crowds. Sometimes it's found in the quiet of a Sunday morning when the world is still and you realize you are enough. No audience, no performance, just peace. And that right there, that quiet wholeness, is one of the most underrated superpowers you'll ever own. If you saw yourself in any of these signs, even just one, pause for a moment and take that in. Because it means something. It means you're growing stronger whether or not the world notices. It means you're building something far more valuable than a reputation. You're building character. Quietly, patiently, from the inside out. You're not driven by applause. You're not chasing a spotlight. You're not interested in proving anything to people who aren't paying attention. Instead, you're showing up for yourself, for others, for your values. And that, in a world that constantly demands noise, is an act of quiet rebellion and real strength. You don't need to shout to be heard. You don't need to dominate to be respected. And you don't need to win every battle to walk away with dignity. Because the strongest people I know are not the ones who say the most. They're the ones who carry themselves with presence, with awareness, with kindness that doesn't ask for anything in return. So if your strength doesn't look like everyone else's, that's okay. Let it look like stillness when others are reacting. Let it look like setting a boundary when others are pushing past their limits. Let it look like saying, I'm not okay when pretending would be easier. Because that kind of strength, that's not performative. That's not temporary. That's transformational. The world doesn't need more noise. It needs more people like you, grounded, discerning, compassionate. People who can move through pain and still choose grace. People who can be powerful without being aggressive. People who can stay true to themselves even when the world tries to pull them in every direction. So keep going. Keep choosing the quiet path. Keep holding yourself with respect when no one's watching. Because every silent victory is still a victory. Every private decision to rise, to speak gently, to stand firm, that's how strength is built. And one day someone will look at you and wonder how you got so calm, so solid, so clear, and they won't know the battles you fought to get there. But you will, and that's enough. If this message spoke to you, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. What's one quiet strength you have learned to honor in yourself? And if you know someone who's walking this quiet path, share this with them. They might need the reminder. And if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe. Because we're building something here. A space for depth, for wisdom, for truth that doesn't need to shout to be powerful. Thanks for being here. And remember, real strength isn't loud. It's who you are when no one's watching.